As I make my way back to Robeck, I reflect on all that has transpired. The Aldmeri Dominion Empress and her entire army launched a massive offensive with the goal of destroying us completely. Myself and a small handful of warriors were driven all the way back to the inner keep. When the inner gate was thrown open, I remember vividly how not even one of the warriors by my side showed any fear. In fact, I've never fought alongside such stout warriors who seemed as if their reservoirs of courage knew no end. We each contributed tremendously to the defense and managed to drive them back. Their losses were massive while we sustained none. The few soldiers that held the fort with me have now moved on to become high-ranking officers in Grand Warlord Dortene's army. There were good warriors who fought bravely and were definitely worthy of the promotion. It was ironic though how Dortene's initial reaction was to abandon the fort, and as a result, didn't send us any reinforcements. Nonetheless, Robeck has been my home over the last 3 moons. Here we've successfully maintained our foothold on the northwestern part of Cyrodiil, while the Aldmeri Dominion initially attacked with ferocity. Since then, we've only had a few skirmishes. Most of the war efforts were concentrated on keeping the Ebonheart Pact at bay, as their efforts to push back against the Dominion have increased significantly. While they have not yet moved against us, we still have to maintain a presence on the northeastern front to ensure they don't swoop in on us from behind while we're busy dealing with the Dominion. Every now and then, a small force would slip by us at Robeck and capture the nickel outpost behind us. This was a familiar tactic, one which I've used many times in the past. Effectively, by cutting off transit through nickel, reinforcements would not be able to arrive in time should a Robeck defense be needed. Being well aware of this, I had already staged a lookout to keep an eye on nickel should any threats be within visible distance. By doing so, I can be immediately notified of the size of the army and only send enough to take care of the nuisance. This way, I could always leave my main force to defend our front line. Dortene wasn't too keen on me staying at Robeck, but she couldn't say a thing, given that the men and women who defended it with me all viewed the epic defense as a big win, which earned me a bit of favor with them. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to warrant their loyalty, but that will soon change once I become Emperor. In the meantime, I made my way to Velastris, which is where Dortene wanted to meet up with me personally. I thought it was strange that all of a sudden she wanted to review my battle plans for moving on Alesia. Of course, I was still suspicious about her giving intel back to the AD Empress, so I decided this was a good opportunity to hit her with a bit of counterintelligence. This way, I could know what the extent of her reach and corruption really is. Together, we were able to capture Velastris, which, by the way, didn't really mean much considering the AD Empress never really cared about the ownership of the town. Unfortunately, this left it unguarded, pretty much open to whomever decided to show the most display of power. We restocked and met inside the transit tower to discuss my plans for Alesia, the Empress's last stronghold maintaining her seat of power. I told her that soldiers loyal to me would ride up to Sejanus and take the outpost. From there, we would ride on to Cropsford to secure a secondary staging location. And finally, we would all attack from the Alesia bridge with an intent to siege down the front door. Of course, this was far from the truth, but I sent a few spies out towards Alesia to keep an eye on our good old Empress, to see if she compensates for any such intelligence. Meanwhile, Dortene set out to meet with another battalion. She left me instructions on preparing a siege up at Chalman. As soon as she rode off, I burned her instructions instead. I had no thoughts of remorse. I knew she was a traitor. I just had no way of proving it. Shout out of the week goes out to Peyton Turpin. My tat cancel is #1. I'll be practicing it too. Thanks for your support, my friend. Now you too have one more subscriber. I decided I would head up to Karmala instead, then flip back around and take care of Nickel. Had to make sure that AD didn't cut off our supply line while we were still barely hanging on to Robeck. On my way up north, I ran into another Nightblade. Fortunately for me, this one wasn't trying to stick a dagger in my back. She was actually Daggerfall Covenant, went by the name Jala of the Wise. She said that she saw me and Dortene working on taking Velastris, and asked if we needed help. When we said we were good, she told us she would start sieging down the front door of Karmala. And sure enough, as soon as I rode up, Jala of the Wise already had the door halfway down. We casually strolled in, mitigating damage while focusing down the guards. We slowly made our way to the back of the keep, and were in the process of rounding up everyone in one nice stack so we could burst them all down at the same time. Hairs on the back of my neck began standing on its ends. This always meant danger was close. I turned around and saw a Dragon Knight leaping right into me. Fortunately, I saw it in time to block the full blow. Dodge rolling backwards, I had to make sure I kept my health above 80%, because when fighting so many targets at once, health can drop very fast. Jalov looked over at me, and I knew exactly what she was going to do. She truly was wise, for she knew that we had to separate the AD Dragon Knight from the rest of the guards. Jalov jumped into the middle of the group and popped her Siphon ultimate, which allowed her to stay alive right in the middle of all the damage. But it was just long enough for her to get the Dragon Knight to start chasing her up the stairs. I immediately went back to work on the guards, for we both knew we could easily get them down if they were separated. It worked perfectly. Jalov brought the Dragon Knight's health down low enough to walk him into a perfectly timed AoE explosion that I had set up thanks to the guards. Didn't even know what happened, and before I knew it, I had crossed paths and become friends with another Covenant hero. Jalov the Wise and I continued on to take Nickel and further secured our foothold on Robeck, firmly setting my eyes on Alessia, the Empress's last stronghold, and for me, the last thing standing in my way. The EP army had begun putting pressure on AD by taking back their keeps in the east, and there was rumor of another warrior who goes by the name Take Brindle, who also had amassed an army of his own. This was perfect. Even without Dortene's help, if EP pushed south to put pressure on Alessia, I could bring a small group and begin sieging the inner keep directly by using trebuchets. If I kept my distance and sieged from the backside away from the action, no one might even notice. The battle was epic. Me and my fellow warriors, although few in number, secretly brought down the inner walls from the back. EP had opened the doors up front. While AD and EP battled it out, my team and I snuck into the keep. From behind, both AD and EP took the flags, opened the portals, and claimed Alessia as our own. This was it. My warriors looked at each other with firm approval, knowing full well that our next step was to charge on and take the rest of the keeps in the Emperor Ring. By doing so, this would crown me as a new Emperor of Cyrodiil. Or so I thought. Although the warriors who fought by my side were the ones who truly deserved credit for dethroning the AD Empress, to the rest of the Daggerfall Covenant, it was Take Brindle who brought in his army and smashed both AD and EP on the front porch. That was the spectacle, the glorious victory that the Daggerfall Covenant was waiting for. As my warriors and I emerged triumphantly from within the keep in a grand celebratory fashion, threw open the front doors, only to be sucked into a much larger, a seemingly much more important celebration taking place that pretty much trumped ours out of existence. The Daggerfall Covenant had selected Take Brindle as their new emperor. Without batting an eyelash, our small band of warriors looked to each other, then to me. All had the same stoic, expressionless face, brow furrowed, as if we were all ready for another attack. I looked down at the sword in my hand, and remorsefully back at my fellow warriors. I sheathed my weapon and nodded back to them, for now we would join in on the celebration. It didn't take long to secure the Emperor keeps, further etching in the thralls of history the name of Take Brindle as the next Daggerfall Covenant Emperor. I looked around for Grand Warlord Dortene and failed to see her at any of the coronation events. It didn't matter too much anyway, since Take Brindle had selected his valued comrade, Growlog the Dragon Knight, to be his new Grand Warlord. Dortene was out of a job. I guess there was some solace in all of this after all. However, The men and women who fought with me, believing in a new Cyrodiil, my ideal Cyrodiil, looked for guidance on next steps. And for the first time, I didn't have any. I told them it was okay, because originally, all of us had set out to bring peace, and that goal was achieved, even though the credit went to someone else. We were all of like mind, believing that although our sacrifices would never be known to all, we took heart that even in the face of the worst adversities, we acted as soldiers, men, women, Breton, Khajiit, Argonian, Orc, Nord, and even some Wood Elves and High Elves. We all stood together, banded together in one cause for the good of the people. And we slept good at night knowing that. We each went our own way. I continued scouting around, helping where I could. Currently, I was riding in to investigate an attack on Nickel, and found Take Brindle and Growlog the Dragon Knight finishing off some foolhardy AD that thought they could attack the territory of the DC Emperor. I felt my blood boil, and didn't even know why. Anger, rage, jealousy, so many emotions filling my head, all directed at Take Brindle. This is unfair. How does this guy just walk in and take the Emperor seat from me? I sized both of them up. Together, I really wouldn't have a chance, but if I managed to separate them in the heat of battle, I could make it look like he was killed by the enemy. The plan was perfect. We rode off in the direction of Velastris. It was AD territory, so we had to take the town back. Take Brindle said something about being bored, and that he wanted me to accompany him up north to, laughably enough, actually take Brindle. The thought amused me for a short while, but as soon as we pulled up to the keep, I began looking for ways to have the Emperor murdered. This felt wrong, and immediately the image of Sheogorath popped into my head. He was laughing maniacally and pointing in the direction of Brindle Keep. I know this feeling, and this wasn't the first or the second time. But again, the timing was too perfect. I wouldn't have another shot like this, so I rode on, pretending to become his friend. We easily sieged down the door and only encountered minimal resistance at the front gate. We tore through the inner gate and began working on the guards, but it was a trap. AD was waiting for the Emperor and had oils placed above the flags as well as the guards. I dodged and mitigated as much damage as I could. I threw out heals towards the Emperor and Growlog. I had to make this look like the enemy killed them should by chance one or the other would survive and get away. If the rest of the Covenant knew what I was planning, I would never be chosen to become Emperor. I had to execute this perfectly, but planning an assassination while trying to stay alive turned out to be harder than I thought. It didn't matter. We were already here. Live or die, we are the masters of our story. As we worked the guards and attempted to stay clear of the oils falling on our heads, I saw an opportunity to toppling charge into a guard the Emperor was fighting. All I had to do was slightly get the guard to push the Emperor right under the oils. He would be decimated for sure. I didn't hesitate. I cast a toppling charge spell and felt my body flying right towards the guard. However, at the same time, the Emperor had knocked the guard back into the other soldiers on the flag, and since my spell had already been cast, it redirected towards the flying guard in a massive dump of oils. I died instantly, feeling nothing but shame and regret. How could I even let it get to this? My journey up to this point had been so epic, full of glorious tales and wonder, only to end here in bitter rage, lying on the ground like a bratty child. If Take Brindle and Growlog were smart, they would just keep going back towards the door, and it looked like as if they were doing just that. Until I heard Growlog shout, "Now!" My spirit floating over my dead body saw Growlog dragon leap into the guards, still taking fire under oil and arrows and spells. Take Brindle cast a ward on himself and stood directly under the oils to bring me back to life. I felt the tug on my spirit as it pulled itself back into my body and pulling me back onto my feet. Take Brindle looked at me with a firm nod and cast a healing spell on me. I nodded back with a newfound respect as I charged up the stairs to take out the rest of the guards. The day was won. Take Brindle and Gralog the Dragon Knight proved themselves worthy heroes of the Daggerfall Covenant. And I had a lot to think about.